theyeshiva.net.
What the Maggid was explaining was not just an issue of time. Remember, in the world of spirituality, it's beyond time. It's not if the neshamas are davening at 6 o'clock, so the malachim could start 6:15. They don't exist in the realm of time. After, in spirituality, doesn't mean chronologically. After means in concept. You have kedima and ichur in time, 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Once you daven, I could daven. It's saying something deeper. It's saying in concept, it could be the same time, not the malachim's davening flows from the neshamas. It said the consciousness is first experienced in the neshamas, and from there comes the shir of the malachim. Shir hashirim, all the songs are rooted in that original song of the neshamas, because they're the pnimius, they're the interlacing link between everything, between heaven and earth. Yeah, it's like an hishtalshalos. Hishtalshalos doesn't mean that the second level comes after the first level. Could be there was never a time that number 2 was not there. But it's still called number 2 because it comes after number 1. Not in time, but in concept. Most basic example, yeah. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 2 minus 1 equals 1, right? Which rule comes first? Which rule comes first? 1 plus 1 equals 2 or 2 minus 1 equals 1? Yeah, so in terms of time, no one comes first. There was never a time, it's not like for 1,000 years 1 plus 1 equals 2. After 1,000 years we decided, by the way, 2 minus 1 equals 1, right? That follows. They were always together, but still this is number 2 and this is number 1. Because the premise is that 1 plus 1 equals 2. Then, because of that, you could say 2 minus 1. If you don't have the 1 plus 1 equals 2, 2 follows number 1, not in time, but in concept. Just a very basic example that in spirituality, when you say first and second, it doesn't mean necessarily on the clock. So when you say the malachim can only sing after the neshamas, the Gemara in Chulin, Baron Yachad Koich V'Boiker, Vayiri Kol Bnei Elokim, the Maggid is saying it doesn't mean necessarily in time. It means the whole shir of the malachim follows the shir of the neshamas. Shir hashirim. Like dibur follows Makshava. Because neshamas are the pnimius of olamas. They're the core, they're the inner consciousness, like the thoughts before the words. It could be I'm thinking and speaking at the same time. But the Makshava essentially precedes the dibur in hishtalshalos, in the hierarchy, so to speak. You understand? In these when we talk about these things, you have to remember that time and space, not to get stuck in those paradigms. But it's still it's in a higher space.
Something without thinking is called
Impulsive, yeah. What?
Been there, done that.
There's a condition. So children have it, adults have it, called a lack of impulse control. The inability to be able to control impulses. It's a neurological condition. It's not, it's something, it's a real condition. So when somebody speaks impulsively, what do we say? Or they do something impulsively, it lacks, like he says, the dibur is mechusser chachma v'seichel. It lacks a focus. It lacks effectiveness. Right? When a parent is impulsive with their children, or a teacher is impulsive with class, with students, we know the results. It's coming from something. I was triggered, I'm angry, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, right? In a marriage, when people start getting impulsive towards each other, they could say very nasty things. What's missing is their pnimius, the Makshava is not there. Sometimes, you're right, because sometimes I'm saying things that I thought about my whole life. So it's even a deeper Makshava. Yeah. When we say Makshava, it doesn't necessarily mean that I sat for an hour before my speech and I prepared. Somebody asked me when I prepare my speech. I say I prepare my whole life. No, but it's true. When you say Makshava, this is your thought process. Of course it's going to come out. You're asking a good question. There were tzaddikim in Poland who said that if they, I think Reb Chaim Tzanzer, maybe there was somebody else also who said that if he remembers what he said, they shouldn't write it down because it was folly. It's not a shkait. And if he doesn't remember, it was a flow. So then they should write it down. Usually most people say, if I don't remember, it's probably better, right? Let's forget it. So he's saying it's a contradiction. But really, when you're in the flow, it's deeper Makshava. It's much deeper Makshava. It's Makshava without an ego. In many ways, that's the source of Makshava, like we spoke yesterday. You're one with the source of awareness.
So is that a maturgum, Rabbi YY?
It's not the I,
Is that a maturgum? When someone is able
Yeah, it's like Shechina medaberes mitach groine. It says by Maisha Rabbeinu, the Sifri says that the Shechina spoke through his throat. He says in Kriya Shema, "V'nosati metar artzachem." I'm going to give you rain. Maisha gives rain. He speaks about himself in Sefer Dvarim. It's his words. It's not Hashem's words. So Shema is part of Sefer Dvarim. Throughout the Shema, you see, he speaks about himself as though he's the creator. He's not. I'm going to give you rain if you listen to my mitzvahs. I'm going to give you rain. He should say, if you listen to God's mitzvahs, Hashem will give you, and not v'nasati. Remember, Sefer Dvarim, he's not quoting. The Gemara says in Megillah that Mishnah Torah, Maisha mipi atzmai amra. Maisha said it on his own. Taisva says, Beruach HaKodesh, but the Havana there is that Maisha was in a place, that's what we learned yesterday, he was a conduit for the Ein Sof. It's like in Halacha, we find the concept, Shlucha shel Adam k'Maisha. Right, Rabbeinu Bechai writes this in Parshas Kisisa, a real shliach, in Halacha, there's 3 levels of shlichus, the Sefer Lekach Tov by Rabbi Yosef Engel. So he explains the 3 levels of shlichus in Halacha, how you define a shliach. One level is, I'm separate from you, but what I do, I'm yoitzer for you. So if I give truma for you, I do b'dikas chametz for you, I give tzedakah for you, right? It's considered as though you did it in the sense that I dispensed your obligation. Another level of shlichus is that yadai kiyadai, it's like your action, it's like a long arm through me. And the highest level of shlichus in halacha is that the shliach is the mishaleach. Automatically, what he does is the mishaleach. The power of shlichus is, it's so to speak, like I assume your identity relative to the shlichus. There's such a deep kinship. Automatically, if I do something, you did it, I didn't do it. Not because I didn't do it, but because the I is part of you. It's a fascinating concept, and he brings rayas. Rabbi Yosef Engel, Lekach Tov, Klal Aleph, he brings rayas from dozens of places in Shas. What level of shlichus is first level, the second level, the third level? In the highest level, that's like Shechina medaberes mitach groine, there's complete oneness. So now, I don't remember what I said, not because it was impulsive, but because it went deeper than the ego that protects words. When I remember what I said, it's because my ego is protecting my words. There's a self-consciousness there. Do they like what I'm saying? Do they not like what I'm saying, right? Are they going to invite me back? Are they bored? Why is he texting? Why is he not texting? Why is he daydreaming on me? That's all. I'm not in the zone. I'm self-conscious. Why are you texting? Just joking. He's not texting.
It couldn't be any other way, you say.
Yeah.
Because he was a Rals Vasayim. A person who is a Rals Vasayim couldn't say anything.
That was the Chiddush of Maisha. He was a Rals Vasayim. The Ran writes, Rabbeinu Nissim writes in Drashas Haran, fascinating, why Hashem had made that the first Jewish leader and the greatest Jewish teacher couldn't speak. Imagine you're sitting with a Rosh Hashiva for 40 years and the poor man stuttering, and it's very, very hard. Why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu, from all people, his koyach was his koyach hatayr, and he couldn't speak? So the Ran says something very interesting. The Ran says that if Moshe would have had the gift, what we call oratory skills, oratory gifts, then you would think that he persuaded, through his gift of gab, he persuaded the Jewish people to accept Torah. Because people who have oratory power can do that. It's like a hypnosis. The Yemach Shemoinik from Germany had that power, Lahavdil. Hypnosis, the oratory skills are so powerful, they could literally abduct people's minds. It could be used in a positive way and it could be used in a horrible way, right? It's very exploitive. So you would think, Maisha, yeah, when you have a good mouth, you could sell people the Brooklyn Bridge, the GW, why not the Tappan Zee, and put in the Williamsburg Bridge too. I tell you that mitzvahs is so hard. Yeah, but that's the gift of gab. You convince people of whatever you need to convince them, and they could be gullible. But when you looked at Maisha, you knew there was no chance that happened. And the poor man couldn't communicate. So the only power he had was the truth, nothing else. It was the pnimius. It wasn't the delivery. There was no presentation. That's what the Ran is saying. Alpi Kabbalah, Alpi pnimius Satira, right? What the Balatanya explains is, what we learned, Kvad Peh, Kvad Lashon, it's higher than the world of Dibur. It can't be articulated and categorized in the world of Dibur. It's called Etzem HaChachma. Maisha was Etzem HaChachma. The Zohar says Kvad Peh, Kvad Lashon, Kvad Peh for Torah Shebal Peh, and Kvad Lashon for Torah Shebiksav. The wisdom can't be articulated in the finite structure of Torah, which is language, which is Dibur. It's Etzem HaChachma. So on that level, Taka Shechina Medaberes B'Torach Groinai, and it's the eye went to a place that's deeper than the eye, the source of awareness, which is the source of the eye. And essentially that's Atzilus. And Atzilus, the eye, the Keli is a flow of the Ur, which is Ein Sof. In Bria, the awareness follows the eye. And in Atzilus, the eye follows awareness. God's awareness. In Atzilus, the eye follows God's awareness. Cosmic awareness, cosmic consciousness. And in Bria already, there's something called separateness, it's Lavush. So the awareness follows the eye. It's the eye that creates the awareness. So there could be very deep connection, but there's ultimately a certain sense of separation. It's a good question. You want to know if every neshama activates malachim. The answer is as follows. The Makshavas that activate malachim are the Makshavas that are the pnimius of the olamas. Right? When I'm having Makshavas of my anxiety or my insecurities or my fears, those Makshavas are coming from my own chitzonius. Right, 70,000 thoughts a day. And a lot of them are about the bank, IRS, right? Your mother-in-law, and repeating themselves, all the fears and insecurities. But there's something else. In every machshava, because lamata adin tachlis, or in every machshava, even the most mundane, foolish machshava, there's something of Ein Sof there. There's a spark hidden over there. It may be camouflaged and covered over with a lot of shtusim and arishkeiten, but there's something there. So that also activates the malach. Because the neshama is present in everything. It's not like my neshama says, you know what, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to Gan Eden for a couple hours. Here, I know it's now a hard time for you in the office, I'll detach. Even as I go through my external journeys, the soul is present. Lamata adin tachlis. So therefore, in all of the thoughts, as external as they may be, there's a nekuda pnimis, there's a nitzos, there's a spark. That's why we say, lo yidach memenu nidach, nothing will be lost. It's not just no people. No machshava is going to be lost. Lo yidach memenu nidach is no thought is going to be lost. Because every thought ultimately will be redeemed. Because even the thoughts that reflect my lowest angels, so to speak, or my most base instincts, have in it Ein Sof. They have in it the Koyach HaNeshama. Sometimes it's on the contrary. The depravity of the thought is so profound because it has so much energy. It has so much energy. Kol hagavoya b'yoser yored lamata b'yoser. So when it falls with a intensity that is much more powerful. Right? Sometimes the worst addictions or craziness, insanity, are holding on to very deep truths. Yeah, so everything ultimately needs halah. The Baal Shem Tov used to speak about halas machshava zaros, halas hamidos, right? Sublimation of thoughts. You have to be in the right position to do it, because if you're in the machshava zara, you have to have boundaries. But the point is, lo yidach memenu nidach is even on machshava. There's a story in Mezhebush. There was a guy got into a fight in the shul with another man. 2 balabatim of Mezhebush. And one of them got so upset, he told his friend in Mezhebush, in shul, in the Baal Shem Tov's shul. We went to Mezhebush, you know that shul. So he tells his friend, Ich will dir koirea kedog sein. I'm going to tear you like a fish. I'm going to literally take you and split you into two pieces like a fish. It's an interesting thing to tell somebody in shul. Ich will dir Korea gedog sein, right? Huh? Huh? Yeah. I'm saying, don't think that shuls only today were exciting. He got angry at him. He said, I'm going to tear you. But it's interesting. He didn't say, I'm going to sue you. I'll beat you up. I'm going to tear you like you know what you do to a fish, right? That was his, you can understand the imagination of this person. So the Baal Shem Tov was there, poor guy, the Baal Shem Tov was there from all people. The Baal Shem Tov had to be there, right? And the Talmidim were there. And the Baal Shem Tov, he took the Klas Talmidim and he put them in a circle and he would put sometimes his hands around them, like in camp when they sing. And he sang a niggin and he asked them to close their eyes. And suddenly they were all horrified because they saw him tearing him like a fish. And the Baal Shem Tov said that every Makshava is a reality. And it creates a reality. Maybe not a reality in Olam HaSiyah, but a reality in Olam HaBriyah. It creates a reality. It's a dynamic. It's a living reality. There's life there. There's presence there. So in a Olam Naila Yoseh, in a higher world, it happens. So the Baal Shem Tov says you have to understand the power of a Makshava in the negative and the power in a Makshava. And every dibur, here it wasn't a Makshava, it was a dibur. So in a higher world, in this world, I just said, I'll kill you, I'll destroy you, I'll beat the living daylights out of you. But in a more subtle world, a world of energy, that was the energy. So we have to understand that's the koyach of a neshama. It touches deep places of pnimiyas. And yet, lo yidach v'meno nidach, everything could be salvaged because there's a oirin sof is lamata adin tachlis. Okay, so in summation, what we have been learning, explaining the Zohar's words, oirin sof lamata adin tachlis, that the light of infinity extends below, downward, till no end, and there's no space that you say is too low for the oirin sof. And what that means is not just that God is everywhere. That's not the chiddush. That's his pashtus. The chiddush is gilui. The Ein Sof is revealed lamata adin tachlis, which means what you're seeing, which seems as separateness, is really also a manifestation and a revelation of Ein Sof. And that's a gewaldige chiddush, because you say this not only about Olam Ein Sof, Adam Kadman, and not only about Atzilus, where Iyu v'chayoy echad, Iyu v'garmoy echad, so there's achdus, but even in the world of Bri Yitzir Asiyah, which is the world of Pirud, the world of disassociation, of fragmentation, even though Bria is still a very holy world. And Yitzir is a holy world. And Asiyah Haruchnis is also a holy world, a spiritual Asiyah. But still the holiness over there is where they are, so to speak, levushim for the Ein Sof. It's not complete oneness. So it's not like in Bria there's evil and darkness and negativity. Bria is considered the world of Malachim and Neshamas. It's called Olam HaKisei, the world of the Kisei HaKavod. But it's still called Pirud. Why is it called Pirud? Because it's the experience of Ein Sof. But there's the I experiencing it. Right? It follows the I. This becomes the definition of the I, but it's preceded by a sense of separateness. And that's the chiddush of Ein Sof Lamata Adin Tachlis in Bria Yitzir Asiyah. And he says that the Baal Shem Tov says every word has Olamus, Neshamas, Alakus. Right, that was the key. Olamus, everything has three layers: the layer of Olamus, and the layer of Neshamas, and the layer of Alakus. Tachtiyim, Shniyim, Shlishim. Every word you're building the Teva, Boyala Teva, and that Teva has three layers, three levels, and the avoid of the person is to be able to align the three, and to be able to access the connection to all three. And that's how everything experiences its ultimate aliyah. And he explained, Olam is generally is Bri Yitzir Asiyah, Neshamas is Atzilus, Kalim, and Alakus is Alakus Mamish, which is beyond Kalim. And the Baal Shem Tov says that the Neshama is the link between Olamus and Alakus. On one hand, the Neshamas come from Atzilus, where there's Kalim, but it's Atzilus, so it's Olam Achdus. We explained this at length, I'm just repeating the Nakud. Yet, as he continued in the Maamer, most neshamas are neshamas of Bria Yitzir Asiyah, which means most neshamas, even though every neshama originates in Atzilus, but most neshamas go through that consciousness of Bria or Yitzir Asiyah. There are those souls, Chad Bedara, unique in a generation of the Bechina of Maisha Rabbeinu in every generation. That's an neshama of Atzilus. And Chad B'Dara, it's one that the whole Dor is inspired by them and empowered by them. So really, just like you speak about Lamata Adein Tachlis, in the world, Lamata Adein Tachlis is also in the neshamas. That even the neshamas that come down to Bri Yitzir Asiyah, it's not like they're really detached. It's Lamata Adein Tachlis. The Oid itself, Lamata Adein Tachlis, so even the way the neshama comes down into Bria, it's the power of it is that it brings out the Ein Sof in Bria, and therefore the neshama is the pnimius of the Olamas, which ultimately can elevate all the worlds back to Elikus, because the Ein Sof comes down in the neshama in Olam HaBriya, Lamata Adein Tachlis. So those neshamas, with the power and the help of the neshamas Datzilus, are reveal in the world the ultimate Iker Shechina B'Tachtoinim Haisa, the alignment, because they are the pnimius ha'olamas. So even when they come down into Bri Yitzir Asiyah, these neshamas ultimately are there to reveal what is the core at the consciousness of the world, that it's not real fragmentation, it's Ein Sof. That was the main point. We're holding Seif Hey, which is page Yud Zayin in the Kuntras, Basi L'Gani, Tavshil Chav Gimel, it's page Yud Zayin. V'zeu inyan Ein Sof lamata adein tachlis. This is what it means in Zoya, the Ein Sof is lamata dekoy ala gilui v'yispashtas b'bchinas Ein Sof ad lamata mat. This is a summation. It's referring to the fact that the Ein Sof, the infinite one, extends and is revealed all the way to the lowest place, b'madreges hayoser acharoines v'yoser tachtoines, in the levels of consciousness that are at the lowest and the last and the lowest. Dahainu, what does this mean? Ba'olam is Bria, Yitzira, and also Asiyah. Shem B'chinas Mata. Spiritually, they're called Mata. They're called the lowest levels of reality. Why? Because of the sense of separateness and autonomy and independence and isolation and fragmentation. As the Samach Tzedek describes in the Kitzer, the abbreviation, the summation of the previous Torah of the Baal Shem Tov we learned earlier in the Likud Torah of Gimel Prakim and the Maamer of Noach, Mayim Rabim, Shebitlas Almin Shem Biad Klolos. Hainu Ak Olam Esein Sof Atzilus Ubyayin Ibn Egel Olam is Biaksiv Af Asisiv Af Hifsik Ki Biyitzir Asin Nikra Alma de Pruda. We spoke about the three worlds in the Zohar. The Zohar says Hashem has three worlds. The Ramah says that's Adam Kadmon, the worlds of infinity, and it's Atzilus and Bri Yitzir Asiyah. It's also called Biyah HaKlolim, the collective Bri Yitzir Asiyah. Ak is Bria, and Atzilus is Yitzirah, and Biyah is Asiyah, not individually, but Klolim. So when it comes to the third category, Elam is Biyah, it's called Af Asisiv. The pasuk says in Yeshaya, it's brought at the end of Pirkei Avos, Koila Nikra B'Shmi V'Lichvoidi Brasiv Yitzartiv Af Asisiv. Between Yitzartiv and Asisiv, there's an Af. Also I made it. Af Hifsik. Af is a separation. Because here there is the concept of Alma de Pruda, what's called in Zohar the world of Pirud. The world in which things are scattered, in which things are isolated, in which things are fragmented. There's no cohesive oneness. And this is even true in Olam HaBriya. That's why it's called Bria. Atzilus is not called a Bria, it's called Atzilus. Atzilus means it's emanating, like light emanates, like the light that goes from one candle to another candle. It's not a new creation, it's an actualization. Atzilus is a revelation. But Bria is already called a creation, even though that which is created is holy and full of godliness. But there's already a sense of experience. There's already a sense of I am one with it, rather than complete oneness. In Atzilus, there's absolutely no blockage, and therefore there's complete achdus. So that's why we say Brasiv Yitzartiv Afasisiv. There's already an inyan of a hefsek, and that's the chiddush of Lamata Adein Tachlis. Amnam inyan zeolayrak b'negei le'elam s'malachim elafilu b'negei le'neshamas. This is not only true about the worlds and the malachim, even the souls of Bri Yitzir Asiyah, they go through this hefsek. In other words, the neshamas themselves go into this lamata adein tachlis. In addition, But now we go to the next stage. The light of Ein Sof descends even into a lower sphere. As he continues, in the evolution of the light of Ein Sof through the worlds from level to level, you have to understand that it gets concealed and eclipsed with every descending madrega, with every descending step. To the point that when the Ein Sof arrives to the world of Galgalim, the world of Galgalim means the world of the planets, the heavenly planets, the celestial planets and spheres, and the world of Mazal is the world of constellations. This is the world of outer space, of stars and planets. The light becomes misava. Misava means it becomes dense. Umisgashem, it becomes materialized from the word geshem. And that's why the flow of the energy that comes into our world, the lowest world, the physical world, is so connected to what's happening in the Galgalim and the planets. And the Mazalis, the constellations, as the Pasuk says in V'zay Sabracha, Umi Meget Tvois Shemesh, Umi Meget Geresh Yirachim, the sweetness of the grain that comes from the sun, and the sweetness of Geresh, of the various grain produces, barley that comes from the moon, or Kamaimer, as the Medrash puts it, Ein Lecha Esav Milmata, Medrash Rabbah, Ein Lecha Esav Milmata, Shein Le Mazel Milmaila, Makabay Vermelagdal. There is no blade of grass below that doesn't have a mazel, a spiritual, he just says the word mazel, so you have to understand what the word mazel means. It doesn't have some mazel, some force above that strikes it. That's makkah. It strikes the grass and says, Gdal, grow. What does this mean? That's how grass grows? Some mazel that comes with a whip and whips it and says, grow. Oh, that's why it's growing so nicely. That's how you make little children grow. You smack them and you say, grow. What does it mean? What it means is it means that there's an there's a light, and there's a divine energy that flows through the grass, through the medium of the Galgalim and the Mazalas, through all of the heavenly spheres. What does this mean? So he starts explaining. For Hainuk, it seems very difficult to understand. For Hainuk, at first glance, it's not understood. The Bishlem ibn Gel is Havusay, some she is Havabay for Namasim Lelamazah Gashmi, moving she in Zatzarachli Sadeh Hamas. I understand when you talk about the creation of the grass, you want it should be created in a way that's consistent with the physical world, just the expression. You want it to be created in a way that's consistent with the, you could have created in a way that's not consistent with the physical world, which means you could have created spiritual grass only. But you want it to be created in a way that's consistent with the physical world. You have to hear the vocabulary here. So I understand that you need a mazel. What's pshat? You need a mazel. The mazel represents that the Ein Sof assumes an incarnation, that the result of that is physical. But when you're talking about the growth of the grass, meaning the vitality that you see in the world, the dynamic vitality that you see in the world, the consciousness, whether it's in a person, in an animal, or in a tree, or in a blade of grass, or in a bush, or in a shrub. Rebbe says in Tanya Geras HaKodesh Siman Chaf, the mazel that says grow is already after the grass has emerged, and it's already there, it already grew. It's not talking about creating grass from nothingness into somethingness. Over there, when you talk about the ishavos, you want a physical grass, so the energy, right, goes through the mazel. But here you're talking about the growth from small to big. Before it grew, who is the mazel talking to? When you say the mazel is telling the grass grow, it means there's already somebody to talk to, so to speak. The question is how it's going to develop. What are going to be the laws of the development of a blade of grass from in its process of growth? or any other tree. This is just an example of grass. It's true about every flower, every single existence. So it's already talking about post-existence, and now you're talking about this grass should grow. So the question is, since you're talking about the chiyus, the consciousness which is divine, why does this have to come through a mazel? So this is the explanation. Since the light descends and it becomes more concretized, more dense, so every flow in this world, not just the creation, but also the continuous growth, it goes through those realities that allow the light to become incarnated and assume the levushim that allow it to be concretized within physical grass and have the grass grow.
So it seemed like there's a month to Yisrael from this.
Yes, so every grass has a mazla. We'll explain in a moment what it means. And he summarizes this in the Maamer. We have to understand the humility of this. That elikus, godliness, is so concealed. It comes through so many layers of Bri Yitzid Asiyah to the point that it's coming out as something that seems like it's just external and physical. It's just a blade of grass. When really, it's Eidin Seif. If this is such a great descent, this is the hafla, this is the stupendous wonder that Eidin Seif, it's really Eidin Seif. But it's Eidin Seif that came lamata den tachlis. What is he saying? Till now, we spoke about Bri Yitzir Asiyah as spiritual worlds. Over there, it's also lamata. But this is still worlds, of Kedusha. You're talking about souls, you're talking about Malachim, you're talking about Gan Eden Elyon, Gan Eden Atachlim. It's also called lamata den tachlis. But over there, there's a consciousness of Elikus. Now we're going already to the next level. Now we're talking about our world of Asiyah, the physical world. When you look, what is he saying here? We learn Hashem created the world. Hashem created the world. But the creator is not seen in creation. Right? In all of the science, they're trying to figure out where did everything come from. So even those who maintain the theory of evolution, and this evolved from this, and 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 all the way to the beginning, and I don't know, it's not my responsibility. Science can't go there. Maybe in 50 years we'll find out. There's a break. Even though you want to go back to the Big Bang, and before the Big Bang, what do you want from me before the Big Bang? I don't know. And why did the Big Bang happen 15.3 billion years ago? Why didn't the prebiotic soup get anxious 29 billion years ago? There was no time. Because there was no time. So what happened 15.3 billion years that the pressure was too much and the chelent exploded?
Trying to come up with a theory. It remains to be a theory.
It remains to be a theory. And there's a reason. At some point you have to stop. You know why? Because you're going over the bridge from Yesh to Ayin. You're going over to that bridge. The boire is called Ayin. Ayin means no thingness. And Yesh is thingness. And that bridge is an infinite leap. It's an infinite leap from Ayin to Yesh. That's called Hisavos. That's called creation. And here is the Chiddush, that the Creator created something that is not Ayin. It's Yesh. It could be measured. It can be looked at. It could be scrutinized. But that which is measured and scrutinized, including our brain, doesn't have the capacity to be able to go back and leap over the infinite gulf between Yesh and Ayin. So some people will just say, I don't know. We don't know, It's the best we can do. I can go back and back and back and back and back, but I can't graduate the properties of Yesh. That's when we're talking about Ishavos. So you say, obviously, for there to be an Asa, for there to be a grass, or however anything came into existence, right? It came from the Rebbeinu Shalom. But here the Medrash is saying something else. We're talking about the growth of the grass. Here we're talking about the chemistry of creation, and that's the Chiddush. Creation itself, you could say, okay, God activated a process. He created even the original materials, right? Which then exploded, morphed into whatever they morphed in. However, all the various theories, etc. Yeah, that original replicative gene, however you want to describe that. The Baide brought that into being. But what is that? That is whatever it is. It's a cell, it's gas, it's bacteria, it's hydrogen, it's oxygen, it's helium, it's light. That's what it is. Yeah, God can create it. That's why he's God. I'm not God. I don't know how to create it. He can create it. But what is the world? The world is a world. Here he's saying something deeper. Ein lecha esav milmata she'ein loy mazel milmayla maka b'avem loy gdal. Grass grows because there is a mechanism, an incredible mechanism, right, that allows vegetation, shrubs, bushes, trees to grow. It allows living organisms to grow based on the manual and the blueprint of the DNA. What is that? What is that? So you could say it's the incredible mind of God that created this mechanism. So the Medrash says there's a mazel hamaka b'ayva'im legdal. What that means is essentially all physical chemistry that we're identifying is spiritual chemistry. And the physical chemistry is responding, it's mirroring, it's reflecting the spirit. It's almost the spiritual chemistry is makabay v'omer legdal. I want you to take this energy and develop and actualize yourself in a physical setting. That's pshat oirein soif lamata adin tachlis. Not that Hashem only created the world. The world itself is oirein soif. What do you mean it's oirein soif? This is a heartbeat. This is a living organism. Right? There are dynamics of science and chemistry. It says that is Oirein Soif, the way it assumed density. So all of the laws of chemistry and every single dynamic in the physical world is essentially infinite divine light. But in order for it to be able to be absorbed and to be able to affect and to be able to become the life force of grass and have the dynamics of grass, the Oirein Soif had to go through tremendous descents, layer after layer after layer after layer. So when you speak about the different worlds, we're not speaking about really different worlds. We're speaking about the same reality. The question is, from which perspective? In Bria, the light went through one type of tzimtzum, so it still remains completely transcendent. In Yetzirah, it assumes a more concretized incarnation. In Asiya, in the grass, or in the squirrel, or in the hyena, or in the star, it assumes a physical incarnation to the point that I could walk outside, or inside, and I could see a rock, and I could see a deer, and I could see the sun, and I could see the moon, and I could see a tree. And what am I looking at? I'm looking essentially at the light of Ein Sof, the way it evolved or devolved and assumed a physical incarnation. So the very consciousness, the very chiyus of everything is essentially all divine. It's Oirein Sof. But it's Oirein Sof that came lamata adin tachlis. So it's not just in the world of holiness. Every element in the world is this koyach hapoyel benifel. Every aspect, when you're studying the dynamics of something, when you're studying the life force, when you're studying the processes, every nekuda essentially is all Oirein Sof. It's Ein Sof. It's the way the Ein Sof assumes a language and a vocabulary that's expressing itself in a grass growing. And that's the whole idea of the Galgalim and the Mazolas. As the descends, one world, another world, another world, it reaches this place where it assumes the identity of physical planets, physical spheres, physical stars, physical light. But essentially, even physical light, what is physical light? It's Oirein Sof, the way it's translated in the physical language. So it's a question of language. And therefore, if you trace it back to its source, you go into infinity. So everything is a combination of the infinity and the finite. And that's why it's not just the creation of the grass, the chiyus of the grass, so to speak, the very consciousness of grass is Ein Sof. It's the way the Ein Sof had to come through a mazel in order for it to be translated into the life of a grass. You talk about an ant or a bee or a butterfly or a bug or a mosquito. It has a brain, it has consciousness. It's the consciousness of an ant. But you should know that it's Ein Sof. It's not it's a consciousness of Ein Sof. I see an ant, I don't see Ein Sof. And I could study an ant for the rest of my life and still call myself an atheist. That's the idea of Lamata Mata Adein Tachlis, that the Ein Sof went through so many yiridis, so many filters, so many contractions, that it assumes the brain and the consciousness of an ant. Which, by the way, is incredible. It's incredible what an ant does. It's incredible what a bee does. It's brilliant. If you learn 90 years, you get a PhD in life of bees, you wouldn't know what a bee knows the moment it's hatched and how hard it works. So essentially we have here the achdus. It's not God created the world. It's much more than that. The Ein Sof Lamata Adein Tachlis means everything in the world is. It's infinite light. That's what it is. It assumed a vocabulary or a veneer, a real veneer, physical organization. And that's why it always depends on the glasses. I always quote Max Planck, right? He was one of the founders of quantum mechanics. He received a Nobel Prize. He was a great physicist. And he once said, we used to think that consciousness is a derivative of matter. Today we know that all matter is a derivative of consciousness. Which means it's the glasses you're wearing that define the reality you observe. And why is it that way? Because that's the truth. If I put on glasses of Olam HaAsiyah HaGashmi, right? I see a tree, I see grass. If you put on the glasses of Olam HaYetzirah, you're going to see Ein Sof, this very grass. We see it today even in science. Depending on the instrument you use to look at reality, you see a different reality. You could see the outer surface. You could see it on an atomic level. You could see it on a subatomic level, subatomic particles. And then you can go into a place where the laws of rationality completely go crazy, right? Where you can't even talk about something being in one space. You can't even speak about fixed models. You have to talk about probabilities. And it's all the same reality. So who's crazy? And they say the reason why something collapses into a single model and goes out of the quantum state of reality into a limited state of reality is only because you're looking at it. Your glasses are guilty for living in such a finite world. What is that? It's not. But that's the ultimate truth about reality. And if we put on the glasses of the Alter Rebbe, what are you going to see? You'll see Ein Sof. That's Pshat Einoid Mulvada. Yeah.
The chiyus of the Gashmius is or Ein Sof. The neshama, which comes from Atzilus, is lower than Ein Sof. Sounds like Gashmius is higher than neshama.
Well, the neshama also, here we're putting everything into that category. We're not making a differentiation. Yeah. The neshama is the one who talks about this. The neshama feels the ayin, because the neshama comes from ayin. So the neshama feels this. Science is a chiddush of Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was the first scientist.
He was the first astrologer too, wasn't he?
What did Avram Avinu? Avram Avinu said, there's even the words, there's laws of nature. You know, it sounds very scientific. That's a very, very deep spiritual idea. Laws of nature. In other words, nature is adhering. Nature has some... who abides laws in this world, yeah? Get one classroom to abide laws. Who got all the laws of nature to work in synchronization for I don't know how many years, and nobody rebels. They do rebel. People. No, I know people rebel. 5,000 years, the sun never had a bad day. The moon is a little lunatic. But the Gemara says, Shemesh yadam avoy, Reich lo yadam avoy. The moon doesn't know if he's coming or going. We reflect the moon. We have to have something in heaven that we should be able to feel kinship with. So we made a calendar around the moon, lunacy. But Shemesh Yadam Avoyai. No, it's a chiddush, right? Laws of what's it called? When something naturally disintegrates. Entropy. Right? You ask your teenage girl to clean up her room. She says, don't worry, based on the universe, I'll just leave it as is. And with every week, it's going to become more organized. You're going to come in after a month. It's going to be a churban. Shebecha, you come in after a year when it wasn't touched. You know what it looks like. With our universe, exact opposite. So Avram Avinu started to be megala this achdus. But that's the achdus that is a boire. Here we're going further. Vayikra Sham b'Shem Hashem Keil Olam. Asks the Ramban, it should have said Keil Ha'olam. Vayikra Sham b'Shem Hashem Keil, the God of the world. So the Balatanya says, no, it's not the God of the world. It's Keil Olam. God is the world. That's the achdus. What do you mean?
The nature and God is like a body and a soul.
Yeah. Nature and God is like a body and a soul. It's like the hand and the glove. But it's not a hand and the glove where it's two separate things. It's an embodiment of Ein Sof. That the word embodiment is the right word. It's an embodiment. It's literally the Ein Sof becoming embodied in the chemistry that I am looking at in a drop of water, or in a grain of sand, or in a flake snow, or in a star, or in the brain of an elephant, or in one of the 70 trillion cells in the human organism, or in one of the 100 billion neurons, or in one of your white blood cells or red blood cells. Every blood cell is an embodiment. It's an embodiment of divine energy. And that's why the very same reality, if you could put on a deeper, more transcendent pair of glasses, you're going to see consciousness. I don't see consciousness because my retina, right? There's an expression in Chavas Alavavas, Kol chush toifes michushai. Everything can grasp a reality based on its own identity. Right? The famous Maslow of Heisenberg, I told you many times, he wrote to Einstein, if you have a net and each hole is 9 inches, you're not going to grasp, you're not going to catch fish that are smaller than 9 inches. It's a very important idea. The reality we grasp is based on the net that we use. I can't expect that my eye, the retina of my eye, right, should be able to grasp consciousness. So it looks at a table, it sees table. It looks at a blade of grass, it sees grass, and that's amazing. And it's supposed to be that way. That's why we make a bracha on an apple, but it creates. We don't look at an apple and we say it's Olam Hatzilus.
I don't believe that grass or physical matter has consciousness. In fact, consciousness is defined in science more. The closest definition I saw, which from Yuval Harari, is that consciousness is ability to experience pain. I know you're laughing. I know.
You mentioned the right name. You mentioned the right name for this class.
I just saw another Hariri who is his relative, and he's a young. So don't judge.
We just learned that he's also going to wear a yarmulke one day. If you study his apicursus, if you study his heresy, you could see how Jewish he is. I once said from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, he says, I don't understand why Charles Darwin was not a Jew. He said he was such a good apicurus. He was straight with Marx, straight with Freud. This fit right into that category. How in the world did he become a guy? He said it must be a random mutation.
But in essence, what's his definition of consciousness? Ability
to feel pain. Yeah, I know Yuval Harari. Yeah.
It's actually
okay.
by different kind of experience.
With all due respect to him, he's a smart guy and an Oxford historian. But his books, Sapiens, etc., have a very, very blatant agenda. That's very apparent behind there. Yeah.
Man, he's a very evil man. That's how Tachton defines itself in a very evil way, right?
Okay, but
apparently, Rebbe needs his experience also.
No, but it's right. That's the paradox. That's the
that's part of Lamata Din Tachlis. Yeah.
How do I square the concept that I am Mazel and Yisrael? We have a Mazel. We are created beings, but it's a
The astrology of Avram Avinu is a...
So the Alter Rebbe writes, Ein Mazel Yisrael is Ayin Mazel Yisrael. Yeah, what here we're talking about is that every single physical reality in the world is really an embodiment of a deeper energy that is embodied through the physical. So when you're studying something, you're studying simultaneously. You're studying it in Olam HaAsiyah, Olam HaYetzirah, Olam HaBriya, Olam HaTzilus. The question is, which layer of reality are you identifying? And that's based on the tools that you have. If I had microscopic eyes, I would look at this very table and I would see something much deeper. And it's not a contradiction. The Keli defines the reality based on which level. And why is that? It's not a mistake, because the Ein Sof went through all these levels until it assumes and becomes embodied in my nervous system. Your nervous system is also Ein Sof. People wonder, why is the body so smart? The body is not so smart. God is smart. The body is, your nervous system is an embodiment of Ein Sof. Yes, it's not Ein Sof the way it's experienced in the world of Ein Sof, it's the way it's experienced as a nervous system. The same is true with the cellular system. The same is true with all of the 9 biological systems that we operate with, whether it's the respiratory, the digestive, the urinary, whatever it is, all these systems. And every nakud, every prat has a mazel. What does it mean it has a mazel? A mazel beats it and says, Gbal. It's not that it beats it. It's getting a cue. It's getting its cues. There's a flow. There's always a flow. There's no interruption. And when I say flow, I'm making with my hand, but I don't mean a flow like this. It's not necessarily a vertical or a horizontal flow. What I mean a flow is, right, not spatial flow, but I mean a flow is that the very physical fluctuations and the very physical, let's say, circulation is Ein Sof circulating. It's the way it's assumed a vocabulary and an image of what you call blood. Because it went all the way down and it comes through the mazel that's giving it its cues.
Pure quantum mechanics here, because in order for things to exist, you need to have an observer. So what looks like a muzzle,
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. In quantum mechanics, you're saying that in order for it to exist the way it exists, you need an observer. That's exactly the point. If an neshama of Bria was looking at the same blade of grass, it would see something else. Because you and I are looking at it, we also see different things. But we see the Ein Sof the way it assumed a Gashmi is the Seer. It embodied a physical Seer. And that's why he said matter is a derivative of consciousness. In other words, what makes it matter is that I believe it's matter. I think it's matter, therefore it's matter. And if indeed my consciousness operated on a different layer, I would see a different reality.
When I look at the grasses, I see the Fibonacci numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it is. People see different layers of existence. An architect comes into a house, he sees something else than I see. Right? Your wife comes into the house, what does she see? A mess. I come into the house, what do I see? A nice house. I don't see the mess, unfortunately. The architect comes into the house, he sees completely something else. A musician hears music. I hear music, I say it's nice. It's a nice song. The musician hears something else. You know what I mean? I see musical notes in a piano book. What do I see? I see black lines that I don't understand. Right? A musician opens up the book and he's in ecstasy. He's smiling. What are you smiling? I just saw black dead lines. To you, they were black dead lines. I saw music. They once asked the Baal Shem Tov why the Chassidim, when they daven, with passion. It wasn't common then. Shuls were more like very dead. Baal Shem Tov, he was encouraged, but the davening with passion. So he said that there was once a man, and he came into a shtetl, and in the middle of town, he saw everybody dancing. And they were holding hands and dancing with such ecstasy. And he tells his friend, this place is a meshugana place. It's the middle of the day, they're supposed to be working, but he's dancing. John said, unfortunately, he was deaf. And he didn't hear that there was a musician that was playing the most beautiful music, and everybody was drawn into the music. So he says, I teach my students they shouldn't be deaf. There's music where you see black lines. It's a music. It's not lines, it's music. It's hey tanzen. I try to teach my students not to be deaf. That's what he answered. So who's right? The answer is, I see black, all I see is a grass. So the Medrash says, don't look at the grass. Understand there's a mazla, makaba, lagdal. This growth is Eirein Seif being translated into it. That's why there's no division between science and Yiddishkeit. It's one of the struggles people have. They struggle. When you learn this, you understand it's not just two worlds. It's Hainu Hach. If it's real science, we have to respect the fact that science has a lot of theories, and by definition, a theory means that based on my knowledge till today, this is my most probable explanation. In 100 years, I don't know, maybe it's going to be disproven. But if something is real science, what is it? It's the Boire being reflected in the Bria. Lamata aden tachlis. So if I'm studying a blade of grass, what am I studying? I'm studying Eirein Seif. You're studying a heartbeat, you're studying Eirein Seif. You're studying the human brain, you're studying Eirein Seif. That's where the Alter Rebbe says, Mi psari echze eleka. Eov says, from my flesh I will perceive God. So most translations are, when you look at the flesh, you understand there's a designer. The Alter Rebbe said, no, Mi psari echze eleka. From the system of the human brain, you can understand the Lakus. That's why in all the Maimarim there's always Mashalim from how the soul works and Kaiches HaNefesh. What you're a proof on God. What are you a proof? Yeah, of course you're a proof. Of course you're a proof because you're an embodiment of it. But Salmeinu Kid Museinu. Mipsori Echze Elika. That's why I'm not talking psychology. You always think I'm talking psychology. I'm not talking psychology. The whole psychology is just a tool to be able to explain Chassidus. It's not Chassidus is a tool to explain psychology. The whole psychology is just a technique to be able to understand a little more Ein Sof. If I speak about Ein Sof, if I speak about trauma, kann man ein bisschen verstehen. Dire betachtoinim, shvir sakelim, toyu. You understand? And that's why psychology was created. What do you think psychology? You think Freud created psychology to make a living? He had a neshama also, lamata din tachlis. Freud understood that in our generation, to be able to be teufus chassidus, you're going to need the language of psychology so that people can be able to internalize it. If you just talk stam, it's not going to relate to them. Huh? Freud. Yeah, his name was Shloimele. Zygmunt, his name was Shloimele.
Grass grows. Neshamas grows also.
Of course neshamas grow. If the body grows, the neshama grows. Remember, all growth is an embodiment of the mazel. The mazel grows. There's a Maslow of the Alter Rebbe. He says, there's sweetness of an apple. This is what he says, the sweetness of an apple. And there's the sweetness of a svara. You say, wow, what a sweet idea. He says, and there's the sweetness of a niggin. What a sweet song. And there's the sweetness of love. He says, they all evolve from each other. But when I'm tasting an apple, I don't hear a niggin. I say, wow, this is a good apple. That's what it means when you're meyachid oilamis, neshamas, and alikus. When you're tasting an apple, you're not just tasting the sour, tardy taste, which is brilliant. How nature knew how to do that, to create such fruits, right? Nature knew what I would like. Yeah. Right? And nature packaged it and designed it and tells me when it's ripe. And it was all a mistake, remember that. And it happens to be that nature also created and made sure that all of the living organisms should be able to be replenished. It happens to be that our biological systems are so in sync that everything that grows, or a lot of things that grow, have the power to replenish us. And it was all a mistake. Not bad. Whoever did all these mistakes, I always say, whoever is behind these mistakes was a pretty brilliant guy. I'd like to meet him. Halavai, I should make so many mistakes.
There is the mitzvah of knowledge of God, right?
No. Leidas Hashem.
Opinion that like by doing science.
The Rambam. Rambam Hilchis Yisod HaTorah Perek Beis. Keitzad hi haderech la'avosayu liyiroisai. How do you come to Ava and Yira? And the Rambam says, you study God's world. Take a look, a beautiful piece of Rambam. He's very, very intricate over there, the Rambam. I was talking once to a group of teenage girls from a very prominent school in Brooklyn, and one of the girls, very intelligent, she says, I can't love God, I can't relate to him, he's transcendent, you don't love something that's invisible. So I asked her, what do you love in life? She said, I love biology and I love science. I said, according to the Rambam, you love God already. You love him. You love the way God is manifested. I mean, who do you think created? What do you think biology is? What is biology? It's not just he created it. It's much deeper than that. That's what we're talking about. Not just his havos, the chayas. The chayas is the chemistry, the life, the consciousness, the design, the substance. Every aspect of physicality is simply a hishtalshalus. It's an embodiment of the Nekuda of Ein Sof. The question is how much it evolved, how many incarnations it assumed, how much the Ein Sof is eclipsed. Yes, that depends on what you're talking about.
Sadia Gaon said, if you're not interested in science, you're not interested in miracles.
Right. People are afraid of it as though the world was created by the Satan.
According to this, better become biologists than computer
No,
programmers.
but we bifurcated philosophy.
You're right. You can distort science. You're right. You're right. You're right. When somebody has an agenda in science, right, to use science as a tool against Ruchnius, that's not science. That's Lamata Den Tachlis. That is it. The Ein Sof comes down in a way that it can be completely hijacked, disassociated, manipulated, and exploited. That's Lamata Den Tachlis. That very good what you said. That's the most probably vicious embodiment, one of the most vicious embodiments of it.
No, eight
I
tachlis.
said
No purpose.
bifurcation. I
That's
said
what.
bifurcation.
You triggered me. You triggered me.
Philosophy out of it.
Think about Dr. Joseph Mengele, Yamach Shemoy V'Zichroi, a doctor, a respectable doctor. Germany produced the most PhDs before the war, came from Germany. What did he use medicine for? He wanted to advance the practice and the wisdom of medicine. How? And what did he use it for? Right? It's such a tragic and classic example of that. Perverted in the most depraved and extreme of ways. And yet that wisdom of medicine that he was advancing, I don't know if you know that till today, when America studies people freezing to death, what is it called? Yeah. And how long soldiers could be in the cold, right? Where do they get their studies from? I don't know. They use Nazi Germany. They did these studies. I don't know if you know, but the best maps of anatomy, the nervous system is so intricate. Even you think till today, 2023, we know anatomy is so subtle. The best maps were created by the Nazis in the 1930s and 40s based on all of their victims. They had so many bodies to study. And there's doctors till today in very big hospitals. I know there was a whole story, somebody went through a surgery. I told the lecture on Shua, somebody went through a surgery and the doctor got stuck and he said, I need that book. And it was a Jewish woman. It was a Jewish woman. And, she felt guilty that her life was saved based on the research that was done with the corpses that they had without number because of all the people they murdered. This is Jews from the concentration camp. I'm just giving you an example of how perverted the wisdom, right? The map of the body is an incredible map. How they use that wisdom. This is...
Churchill said the lives of perverted science.
Yeah. So this is the Vart. This is part of the Lamata Den Tachlis. This is already the next level. Not just Bri Yitzirasi as worlds of Kedusha. This is already the way it comes down all the way into our physical world. And what is it? It's Eidin Sof Lamata Den Tachlis. So in a person, it's also that way. When you speak about a piece of grass, a blade of grass, it's also a person. that every emotion we have, every sensation we have, our life force, my consciousness, which includes my sensations and my experiences and my emotions and my impulses, that's my chiyus. A grass doesn't have my consciousness. It has its consciousness. It's busy asking itself, good morning, how much should I grow today? That's the question of the grass. The human being wakes up in the morning and says, good morning, what should I do today? Grass never has that question. They never doubt what they have to do. You think I should quit my job and get a new job? You think it would have been easier to be somebody else? You think I want to be me? Right? A dog never has that question. A dog never says to piddle or not to piddle. That is the question. To be or to be not. That is the question. But we wake up in the morning. That's our consciousness. Never think that it's divorced from Ein Sof. It's lamata adein tachlis. If you go to the pnimius of it, you'll be able to see even what we call Yetzer Hara. Sahara are the impulses that are low. That are low. That's going to be the next piece. Till now, we're talking about a blade of grass. A blade of grass is not evil. A blade of grass is neutral. In Tanya, it's called klipas noiga. It's a klipa, but there's a lot. You could use it for beautiful things. You could use it to design the shul on Shavuos, for those who do it. Not the minig hagra, but other minhagim. You could use grass for many other beautiful things, right? Huh? That's the main thing. That's what everybody does here. Grass juice, $20 an ounce.
It's as close to the blood cells as it gets.
Yeah, etc., etc. But then the next step is when you come to Klippa, when you come to real Klippa, when you come to the world we call the world of evil. The question is, does the Lamata Adein Tachlis go there too? That's the last shtickle of the Maamer. Be'ez Hashem will do tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll begin 7:45 a.m. because they finished davening a little earlier, and we have a women's class at 9:30. So I'm going to wish everybody a beautiful, meaningful, and inspiring and unifying day between Olamus, Neshamas, and Alakus. Chaim Levrach. Du sagst L'chaim nach Verbringen. Heute gehen wir verbringen. Okay. We'll cover the Eirach von London. It's a B'nonshal Gedoshim. Kol Omer Davar B'Shem Omer is everything. And then there's the spiritual meaning of Davar B'Shem Omer we spoke about. Right? Kol Omer Davar. Davar B'Shem Omer Baruch Sha'amar V'Haya Olam. The way is the word, yeah? Davar B'Shem Omer.
So I guess it looks like I'm triggering somebody by mentioning some names. So I don't want to be. I don't want to delay Mashiach.
In this class, we try to teach everybody not to be afraid of triggers. Lo yidach mimenu nidach. Every trigger is going to come back.
It's like, am I true to the oilam or not? So if I don't say something in the name who said it, so I'm just covering it up.
When a person is being triggered, it means that something touched me in a deep place, right? So there's something there that I want to explore, right? Something, the lion woke up, right? The bear was woken up, and if it's a real trigger, it's a scary lion, right? So you want to know what just happened. The curiosity can lead a person to very profound awareness.
What's wakes us up? It's coming and hearing your profound Torah.
Thank you. Vayikatz kiyoshin Hashem.
Impulsivity. You mentioned there is disorder of somebody.
Impulsivity. You're right.
Disorder means like.
But dibur, words that come after Makshava have a different potency. When a father thinks how he's going to communicate this to his child in a way that's loving and effective, it's a different conversation. Rather than, you don't do this in my house. You understand?
That's the very point.
If you, I believe, not think, if you're just in the right place.
That's what I mean.
But when you talk, you don't prepare, right? You're just in the right place.
Right, but that's what Makshava means. Makshava doesn't necessarily mean that I sit and I think, okay, Now I'm going to tell you, good morning, how are you? Makshava means that the dibur is coming from my source. I'm in the flow. I'm in the flow. In the flow, Makshava precedes dibur. Makshava is consciousness. Makshava is not just active thoughts.
You never said like when you teach, maybe you probably good example for this. That, like you said something brilliant, like it came.
That's true. The best things I didn't think about.
The state is important.
That's true.
You like you probably it's like
Constant. That's the main thing of a class. The main thing of a class is not what I prepare. You have to prepare.
you said you prepared for longer, right? So when I was his father, today had my
You're right.
my kid did something wrong today, and I wanted like I think I handled the Jew. So that's the state. Prepared the state.
Exactly. Reb Tzvi understood.
I think the biggest concealment that Hashem is creating the world right now is
Yeah. So the creation happens every moment. And he says, I understand why creation happens through the mazel, because you have to create something that's physical, that's consistent with the physical world. When you're talking about the chayas, the life is the spiritual consciousness. Why does that have to go through the mazel? And the answer is, because it's not that there's a spiritual consciousness that's removed from the world. The spiritual consciousness is begilui in the world. In other words, it assumes a physical incarnation. It becomes the embodiment. That becomes the physical chemistry. So it has to go through the mazel. So it has to go through the mazel. Not just the ishavos, but also the chayas. This is consistent with the whole Maamer, that it's not that the Ein Sof is mispashet everywhere. God is everywhere. It's begilui everywhere. Begilui means that it's absorbed by the creation within its vessels. The grass looks at itself, it's a grass. That is Ein Sof. That's the chiddush of the Maamer. The gilui. Not just this pashtus. The tzaddik of Atzilus, he sees the world from the prism of Atzilus. He sees Achdus. Oidus Bekelim. Ezo Chachem Haroyas Hanoilad. Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, Perik Mem Gimel, Chachma means you see everything being born. Being born. Haroyas Hanoilad, being born. That's what Chachma is. Ezo Chachem. So you have a neshama like Maisha is Chachma of Atzilus. Etzem HaTorah. That's the neshama. It's called Achim V'Reim Lamakam. Brothers of Zah. You have lower neshamas that come from Zav and Nukva. They're still in Atzilus, but they're on a lower level. And then you have neshamas, most neshamas of Bri Yitzir Asiyah. So you have 3 levels of neshamas. Just like we spoke about 3 levels of Olamus Ein Sof, Atzilus and Biyah. So within that itself, in neshamas you also have 3 levels. You have neshamas like Maisha, that's like Ein Sof. You have neshamas of Atzilus, that's like the 2nd level of neshamas that come from Yichud Zun. And then you have most neshamas, which are in the 3rd level, Bri Yitzir Asiyah. So you have these 3 on different levels. And yet the neshama is the pnimius of every olam, meaning even the way the neshama comes down in the lowest place, the neshama represents the link to higher. That's the chiddush of the neshama. The neshama never goes through the real detachment. It always remains attached in detachment. In other words, the power of the soul is to show how the individual identity, which apparently is detached, is really one with the infinite, without compromising the detachment, without compromising the embodiment of the self. That is really what the self is. That's the koyach of the neshamas of Biyah. And that's where they give the malachim. That's why the malachim do shira after the neshamas.
Do malachim grow? Do they experience pain?
Not like neshamas. It says, "V'nasati lecha mahalchim bein ha'oimdim ha'elin." Malachim are called oimdim, and neshamas are called mahalchim, because even though neshamas grow, it's more of a predictable, consistent orbit, where the soul is capable of quantum leaps in both directions. So it's a different level of growth.
They suffer, right? If I don't know whatever definition of Gehenna is, but looks like it's a place where people suffer, or neshamas suffer or have pain. So I would understand the neshamas, even in the oilamus without the bodies, they might experience some pain. I don't know, or maybe some they experience joy, some experience pain.
Yeah.
But there is a it's most likely experience of these feelings, right? Malachim, I don't know. Looks like they're just like a text message, send a text message to this guy. And
You're saying malachim are like artificial intelligence.
that's why, at least from what
I hear you. Interesting.
I can't get the feelings.
What they sing?
Huh?
It says malach Michal is Ava, malach Gavriel is Yira, Gvura. Music. We learned Shir Hashirim. All the music in the world comes from Shir. Shir is Hanashamas. Shir Hashirim. He said, the Maggid says, Shir Hashirim. All the songs in the world come from the one Shir.
So when I compose music, where does it come from? My neshama?
It comes from, when you're in the flow, it's coming from the source. Yeah. Vayhi kenagin hamenagin. Vayhi kenagin hamenagin.
Because someone said that the shar hanagina is near the shar.
Yeah, it says that. There's an old vart, there's an expression in Yiddish, chazonim and aronim. The cantors weren't always considered the brightest people. So they said, why? Because the Heichel HaNagin is right near the Heichel HaTshuva. So if you're a chazan and you're in the Heichel HaNagin, you should already go into Heichel HaTshuva. You're already there. Why don't you go into that? It's an old vart. It's a way of expressing an idea. In other words, if you're already there, there's a sefer, there's a commentary on Megillus, Esther, called Monas Halevi. It's a commentary that was written by the Shloimeh Halevi El Kabatz. He's the composer of L'Chadoidi. He was a brother-in-law of the Ramak, Reb Moshe Cortevero. He was murdered in Sfas. He's buried in the old cemetery there. Reb Shloimeh El Kabatz. He wrote L'Chadoidi, the poem. He has a commentary called Monas Halevi. So he says, Achashverosh made a beautiful feast, 187 days. He had everything there, right? You see, in terms of design, in terms of drinks, beverages, in terms of food, in terms of hospitality, everything. He says, the one thing you don't see is music. No music, why not? That's what he asks. And he answers that Achashverosh wanted to take, it was an opportunity to take the Jews away from their past. He used the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash, Nenu Misadasa Shalosei Rasha, and he knew that music, any type of music, triggers the neshamas. It's ma'ored the neshamas. It brings people to tshuva. That's why he didn't have music. That's what he writes. Shlomo Al Kabatz, huh? And he says that's why children, infants, even in the womb, respond to music, because the souls in heaven are always singing Kol Balei Asher. So when they come down, there's a sense of music that they still respond to. The neshamas in the source, there's a lot of shira. Shir Hashirim. Well, here we're talking about Bria. Elam Abriya.
See little boys who stand in front of the video of the Rebbe. The Rebbe starts singing the kids just light up.
There was once an experiment done in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if you know Joshua Bell. He played the violin in the subway station. Washington, 8 o'clock in the morning. 8 o'clock in the morning. Joshua Bell is one of the biggest violin. They wanted to see how people will respond when there's no concert. You know, the art doesn't have a frame. He's not publicized. He's wearing a baseball cap and rags, you know. He looked like a homeless fellow playing the violin. He was holding on to the Stradivarius, probably $15 million. And, it was a sad experiment because the amount of people that stopped was minuscule, but he was in a rush. You know, he came away with $32, and he did some of the most beautiful compositions and symphonies. And he says, the worst thing is you finish and there's nobody to applaud. Nobody noticed that you finished. Right? Because it shows that people, if the art is not publicized, there's no ad in the newspaper that tomorrow there's going to be a concert and you have to pay $10,000 for back seats. It's in the subway. It can't be good. It's real, but people are not real. So they were looking what demographics, was there a demographic of people, relative percentage-wise, that was drawn? And they found one, children. There was a disproportionate amount of children that stopped and turned around, and their parents schlepped them. So we got to go. It was 8 in the morning. We got to go to school. We got to go to the doctor. Their parents schlepped them. Disproportionately, it was children who responded to the music. It's crazy. There was a black man working in a kiosk in the subway station, and he was sweeping. And he snuck out of the store and he was sweeping around the store just to be able to watch. So there were people who, they felt something, but the majority of people, very powerful experiment.
That part that there was another experiment where people played music in the ocean. And when they played bad music, nothing happened. But when they played good music, dolphins started to jump out and in synchronous movements with the music.
Yes, that was amazing. Musical brains, yeah. I also once saw somebody playing music with elephants around, and they were really they really responded. It was very powerful. You know, we always learn that the animals are hishtalshlus of chayas hakodesh. Every animal, every behemoth comes from one of the malachim. So there's a lot of spiritual energy there. It's just the way it's embodied in animals. The Rechayim says that lions, in this shirish, are higher than kosher animals. Pnei Aryeh el Hayamin, in the Merkava, the lions are on the right. But when they come down into a more brute and aggressive demeanor because they come from a higher shirish. So it's actually dependent on each other. So you see in a lion much more vigor. So we translate the vigor as beastly, as undomesticated, as dangerous for good reason. But really what it is it's a deeper intensity of Kedusha. But the way it comes down, it assumes a completely different veneer.
It's actually, if you look deeper, you know, there is a guy who adopts the lions and grew up. The way the lion has affection for this guy, it's phenomenal. He embraces him, hugs him.
Yeah.
Did you see a cow embracing and kissing somebody?
Right.
So that's
the intensity of emotion is very powerful. Right, it comes from chesed, but it teaches us that sometimes the deepest forms of love, when they trickle down many, many levels, they can have a very different expression. Sometimes the deepest aggression is coming from the deepest love. That's pshat l'mata aden tachlis, right? If my love was hurt, my aggression has to be much stronger to protect me. So all the aggression you're seeing is really sensitivity. It's a very profound idea. This is the idea. This is one of the main nekudas here. What looks like the greatest distortion, right, is just commensurate with how much infinity it's hiding. It's very, very, you understand? The more Ein Sof it's hiding, the more intense the distortion, because it has to hide a lot. It can't just put on a little klipa, a little shell. It's going to burst out the Ein Sof. So I have to create a blockage that is so much more powerful. It's an ishpashat. Huh?
That's what we learn with Shabbos.
Torah Parshas Boy, the aggression coming from Ava. Biyad chazaka. Okay, yeah. The Mujitzer, yeah.
And the music just came to him.
Yeah.
And afterwards, they sang to him. He said, "I composed that."
Yeah. Yeah, he was in the zone. Also, the Mujitzer had a surgery in Berlin, you know. They couldn't do anesthesia. He said he's going to compose a song, and when he's singing it, they should do the surgery. I think it was the song he composed, Eila Eskera. It's a song they sing in Mujitz at his yard site, Yud Gimel Kislev. They sing it once or twice a year. I think Eila Eskera, I think it has 32 stanzas, maybe more. They sing it on his yard site. I think they sing it Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, I've heard the niggin. They did this surgery in Berlin while he was singing this song without anesthesia. The Mujitzer Rebbe is a koyach hanagina that was unbelievable.
The question is,
Yeah, the ego blocks the Ein Sof. We want to be able to relax the ego, but what we're learning here is that even the ego is also an embodiment of the Ein Sof. It's just a distortion. So we have to unburden the ego of its unnecessary shells. That's how you transform it.
A person can person can live without ego completely, no ego. Like what's good? Ego is not the motivation of every person.
Yeah, so when you speak about ego, there's an unhealthy ego and there's a healthy ego. So we have to be careful to distinguish. we could try to live without an unhealthy ego. The unhealthy ego is the ego that takes us away from ourselves, from other people. That's the unhealthy ego. Yeah, it's the ego that's there to cover up my real self. I'm afraid to live with my real self, so I create a counterfeit self called the ego. Ego stands for easing God out. But then there is the ego in terms of the healthy ego, the real ego. There's an expression from the Mittel Rebbe, the Yesh HaNivra is really an expression of the Yesh HaAmiti. The Yesh of the Nivra in its truest sense is an expression of the Yesh HaAmiti. It's the self that reflects the divine self. That you don't want to get rid of. In fact, you can't get rid of it. Yeah. When the Mishnah says in Sanhedrin, Chayev kol echad vechad loymar b'shvili nivra ha'olam, every person has to say the world was created for me. That's a healthy ego. It sounds arrogant, right? The world was created for me, but what it really means is that there's something at stake in my existence that the whole world needs. That's a motivator, but that's not unhealthy.
Zoek nog van tzaddikim that the ganze avodah wasn't done, and let's say when they daven, they should have zero pniyas and like nothing should be for them, and mamish only like how do you have motivation if nothing is for you and you don't have anything else?
Du darfst lernen mehr Chassidus, wirst du gleich verstehen. Du darfst lernen Chabad Chassidus, wirst du verstehen. What we hear in all these stories is just words. We don't feel the experience. When you just hear words, it's not going to make sense. Because you're asking a good question. What's going to be the motivation? When they said they don't want to feel any pniyas, it's not that they want to become shmatas, kaskupa nidresses. It means that they want that their self shouldn't be a blockage of the Ein Sof. They want that their very selves should be a conduit for Hashem's self. So they become more powerful, not less powerful. You understand what I'm saying? Shluchei shel adam k'Maisha, if you're a shliach, you're more powerful than if you're not a shliach. You know why? Because you have the koyach hamashaleach. If you have the koyach hamashaleach and he's infinite, you're more powerful, you're not less powerful. So the bittul and the confidence come together. The deepest bittul creates the deepest confidence. Because bittul doesn't mean I'm a nothing, step on me, slap me in the face, here, take the other cheek, slap me again, here's my cheek, slap me again. And I'm a shmata, I'm a nobody, and the more you insult me, the better it is, because I'm such a shmata and I deserve it. That's chitzonius and it's not real. You understand what I'm saying? The pnimius of it is that there's no separation between me and Hashem. Now that's very, very deep. What does that even mean in a person's life? But it means that I don't have to protect myself. I can let go, I could surrender because I'm falling into something that's absolutely real. So I don't have to be uptight. I don't have to protect myself. I don't have to wear a bulletproof vest in every conversation. I could be completely open and transparent because my real self can just relax. And that's the hardest. Because that means I have to let go. That means I'm in a place of trust. But that's power. It's not that you let yourself be abused. It's that what other people call abuse, you may not even, it may not even affect you because you're coming from a much deeper place. You don't have time and energy to be angry with people because you're in a much more wholesome place. So when you say these tzaddikim, they didn't get angry, and the Gemara says, Hanel lovim veinam oilvin, shomin cherpasim veinam meshivim, right? You can embarrass me and I don't answer. It's not that I'm so insecure that the more you embarrass me, the better it is. It's rather what somebody... I gave a speech here in the tent, when was it? A few of you were there. One of the Yomim Tovim, Shabbos Shuvah Shabbos. So my son was there. You were there probably. I quoted a Gemara. I said it's a Maseches Shabbos. So you know my son Mendel. So he gives a scream. It's Masechta Beitza. Masechta Beitza. Fine. So I looked who is it. I didn't know. I heard. I looked. I said it's my son. I said you're right. It's probably Maseches Beitza. Okay. It's actually in both, but whatever. And I smiled. It was actually very beautiful. It was very beautiful that he knew the Gemara. I was very proud of him. A Yid comes over to me the next Shabbos. And he says, how much Musar did you learn not to get humiliated at that moment and actually scream at your son later and punish him for what he's doing? I looked at him. I didn't know what he's talking about. How much Musar I learned. Why do I have to learn Musar to do this? He says, I'm trying to reach this Madrega. I can't reach it. If my son would do that to me, I'm like, I don't understand. Why is that embarrassing? It was beautiful. I said over a Gemara, and he knew where the Gemara is. That's like a nachas for a father. Why are you this? He says, wow. I don't know how much Musar. So I told him, it was so mufrach by him. So the pshat is that if you're really in that zone, right, things don't affect you, not because you're not sensitive, because you're just in a much more place of wholeness. You know, when we're in that place of wholeness, we don't get triggered in the same way. That's the idea. B'steifus, das is bittel.
Like, somebody serves you. Some people are very comfortable to serve. Like, for any job, like somebody likes to serve. He wants you to feel comfortable. Some people believe when they serve you, they like what they want from you. Some people want to make you happy. They hate people not serving you. Some people are very uncomfortable because they have to serve you. They're more shalom people. They hate to make you comfortable. My job is to make you happy. I'm a waiter. I'm a waiter. Like, I'm not gonna move my second just because. Like,
it really, I guess, depends on confidence. You know, waiters are powerful people. They could make a comment that really enlightens the guests.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.